Hi, this is George Alger, and welcome to this segment of Our Ventura TV. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the history of the California Central Coastal Area. And today's guest expert is a local photographer, Chris Ryan. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing good. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Let's just jump right into the topic here. Can you, perhaps mention something that inspired you about the coast that has to do with the history of it that will help enlighten the audience on this topic?
Yes, I really like the history of the San Buenaventura area, especially the mission and the whole pier and all the history that brings. In particular, what I like is, the El Camino Real and the whole establishment of the El Camino Real and the mission. This was just another stop on that whole path that Father Serra had set up back, many years ago. And that is kind of an influence for me, the El Camino Real, the bells themselves that are, spaced out every 2 miles up and down the highway. And that whole coastal attraction and the history in particular of our area, San Buenaventura, has been most appealing to me. That's certainly what I like to really get out there and capture.
Good. And for those who might not be so familiar with the El Camino Real, it's, do you know how many miles that path is?
Yeah, I know it stretches all the way from the southern border of California, I think San Francisco, and possibly, beyond. It's just a whole series of missions that are been around for hundreds of years, I believe.
Yeah, and I think it was supposed to be one donkey ride in between them or something like that.
Yeah, and basically that's what it was, and all these vias or these routes off of that where they had stops was where they had a mission and a small, kind of town like they have in Old Town San Buenaventura right there that's just been there forever. And you can see the timelessness in those cities, and it's just a beautiful area to be up there.
Good. Now, is there any connection you can make from a historical perspective regarding the coast itself and the mission?
I know that the pier was used a lot. Originally its intentions was a trading. There's actually, what's really neat is there are actual ships that used to pull up to the pier, and that's an amazing fact that we just don't get to see anymore. But I know it was kind of a trading post either by ship or by the El Camino Real. So this was kind of a hub, I know, for Ventura in terms of activity, bringing in goods and sharing with people up and down the route.
Good. And actually, just to introduce a little bit of your work here, I know there is one here of the Ventura Pier.
Yes.
And this is taken, you can tell, just south of the pier itself. And do you happen to know when the pier was built?
I don't know the date offhand. I'm guessing it's going to be around 100 years or so, that's for sure. I have seen some photos from the late 1800s where I've seen the ships pulling up to the pier, so I know it's been around for quite a bit.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it has definitely been around for a while, and I think it's been rebuilt a couple of times.
Yeah. It's withstood the test of time. I know it's been hit by huge waves, and it's a real effort to keep that going. I know there's a whole committee dedicated to that purpose. Pier Into the Future is a nonprofit organization that is continually striving to keep and maintain that and collect funds and have fundraisers for that in the county. So they're a good committee as well, and I actually contribute photos to them to help their cause, and because I capture the pier, so I share that with them as well.
Good. And I didn't know the connection though between the pier and the mission. Mm-hmm. I believe the mission came sometime before the pier, but it makes sense. Okay, the mission was it's still active today, but yeah. That would have been it's a prominent way for commerce to occur for everyone that was living around here.
Exactly.
Good. So let's discuss this history a little bit more. What other things can you tell us that just tell us about the history of the Central Coastal California area?
Yeah, I think there's you'll see also as part of not only just the missions, but there's also the agriculture, which is another part of the county as well. And there's certainly a lot of history with the people who work the lands here. I mean, they've been working them for a time back when the missions were established, and that's also been a part of the history. It's not as well known, I think, but that's something that people should be aware of. It's very prolific throughout the Ventura County. I mean, you see farm fields up and down the highway off of El Camino Real, off the 101 freeway. It's very prolific out here, and very much a hard-working people that are doing all that labor for us and taking care of that. So I have an appreciation for just all those efforts of the mission, the people that established the pier many years ago, the agriculture. You can see that these things have been going on for many, many years. This is not some new or young county, but that's what I like, and what I do in photography is try to capture that timelessness of the pier and the people and the different areas, and I kind of try and bring that back to share with others who may not be familiar with the area.
Good. Do you have some familiarity with the history of the harbor?
Not so much in the harbor. I do know that there's a couple of harbors, in fact, that we have. We have the Ventura, and I know we have the Channel Islands, which is nice. I know the harbors have served the transportation to another historical part, which is the Channel Islands themselves, located off our coast, which have been there forever as well. And so I know that the harbors facilitate that. Taking trips and photography, tours out there is certainly helping people see the islands. So there's certainly a use for the harbors to go and facilitate the tourism and to be able to explore the islands and see that part of the county that, like I said, most people just don't really get to see typically.
Okay, good. I had mentioned the harbor just because I know we have another photo here, so I'll just bring this up. And
yeah, that's the Ventura Harbor. That's the inlet up there in Ventura Harbor, and you can kind of see the mountains heading up towards Santa Barbara in the far background. And it's just an example of the beautiful coastline that's between Ventura Harbor up to Santa Barbara. This Gold Coast area, it truly is a Gold Coast. I mean, we have some of the most spectacular sunsets, I feel. I've seen the ones in Hawaii and all these other places in the world, but Ventura during the fall and winter, it certainly is amazing, just as you see here in this photograph.
yeah, quite beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, so introduce to us some other facts that even those of us who live on the coast might not be aware of in terms of coastal history.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting is the story of the El Camino Real bell, basically going up and down. I don't know if you realize, but there was a point when people were taking down the bells and people were stealing them and using them for salvage value, and the whole path of the bells was just lost. And there was a gentleman back, I think, in the 50s or 60s who discovered the foundry, the molds, and all the original casings that were used to produce these bells. And it was dormant for the longest time, and I think he basically bought it, and they've started producing those bells, and they've been resetting those up every 2 miles up and down the entire El Camino Real. And it was, it's an effort that originally started from the women's clubs of California. Back in, I think it was early 1904, 1905, the women's clubs were asked, how can we commemorate and acknowledge this historic El Camino Real? And it was their idea to create this system of bells as a memory to remember that. But like I said, they stole them, and then this guy bought the foundry. And if you see them, now you'll see newer bells up and down. They don't look like they're 100 years old. That's because someone has been purposefully reestablishing the El Camino Real and all the bells. And so I have a good connection. I've actually talked at the women's clubs and mentioned this to them. And it's surprising, a lot of them didn't even realize the history that they adopted, this whole, the bells and the whole El Camino Real path. So they did a good job, and that's something, again, that gets me up and down the coast. Sometimes I like to capture just the bell with the coastal scene in the background or a community in the background, just to show, they actually pick some nice locations for those bells. If you ever start paying attention to them up and down the highway, you're going to see wow, that's a nice spot. And it's just a really neat little piece of inside history on California there.
That is so cool. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah.
Now, I know parts of the PCH run along the old El Camino Real.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if it's, how much of that? I mean, is it now all of that, or is it half of it, or what percentage of it?
It's an interesting path. I don't know the percentage, but the El Camino Real swings between the 101 and the PCH, and those kind of intertwine as you go up the coast. Sometimes, the PCH will be more on the edge of the coast, whereas the 101 will be slightly inland. So, the El Camino Real changes paths. Sometimes you'll just see it on an access road next to the 101. It's not actually the 101, but this old dirt road that was there, and they just kind of built the freeway next to it. But they've kind of stuck to the path, and the bells out there kind of tell you when you're on it in a significant location. So, it's interesting to see how that all goes up and down the coast.
Good. So how is it that you came to, be a photographer of this, of this topic?
Well, I live here in Oxnard and certainly Ventura County, so just being here, I tend to do photography outside of California, traveling in the Great West, but when I'm here, not traveling, I get the opportunity to refine my skills and just get out there because of our beautiful area and just continually take pictures. And every time I see clouds forming in the sky in my area, it's like I'm on standby, I'm on like alert, my ready to go bag with cameras, and if the clouds look right, I'm gone. I'm out there taking pictures usually all the time. So this area is like I said before, it was just a beautiful most beautiful sunsets during the winter. Right now it's just a nice time to enjoy the outdoors, especially with the spring and summer, and start capturing more of the people out there on the coast and more of the activities, the boating, all the activities that people do in the county. It's a real active, youthful coastal community. I like that fact that all the people are always usually out there enjoying the outside. So I like being in the area and taking pictures to capture that.
Good. And you mentioned your trips to the Northwest, and
Yes.
I know we have a couple here, but let's see if we can at least get
Sure.
this one in particular in, because
Yeah.
I think it's good to see how clean water can actually be in the United States, where
That's a good
it looks
point.
like the boat is floating, but really that's just how clean the water is.
Yeah, this shot was taken in Clear Lake, Oregon, which is in central Oregon, just south of Bend. And there's a lot of lakes you come across in California, even other states, that are called Clear Lake. It's a very common name for a lake, but I've seen those other lakes, and then I came across this Clear Lake in Oregon, and I go, hands down, this this is the epitome. This is the definition of Clear Lake, in my opinion. And it's a real photo. In fact, I had a recent art show, and this is kind of the large ones I have on a canvas, and it created such a controversy of photos like, no, that's Photoshop. That can't be real. That looks three-dimensional or some other type of effect. And it's really not what I do in terms of my photography. I'm a kind of a purist. It's straight from the camera to the canvas or to the print, and that's what this was. And so it's actually interesting to have this debate and go through the photographers who think they can see what's going on here, and it's a moot point, because it's a real photograph, and it was captured as is up there in Oregon.
It's quite beautiful.
Thank you very much.
And I'll think if I can, I'll just slip in one more before we run out of
yeah.
time, but I happen to be a fan of the Redwoods too, and could you comment on this one?
Yeah, this is a very, very special photo. This was when I started doing photography back in 2011. I initially did a road trip, and normally people take 1 week, 2 week vacations, but for me I took 3 weeks off. And I drove all over the Great West capturing photos like this photo in Northern California. This is the Redwoods, California. And it was an inspirational trip to me. It was my first road trip, and this was actually a first photo of my first professional outing, taking photographs and seeing the Great West. And so when I came back with stuff like this, people were like, wow, you've been doing this a while. I says, no, this was my first year. I just really started. And so that's what's, I brought a lot of these photos that are lasting to the day with people, and they're connected to this image. And it was just, one particular year many years ago. And it's funny because I go back to here every year since then in September, and it never looks the same. It's just one of those things where you need to appreciate it for the moment you were there, and never expect it to repeat again. But it is a lasting image, and that's what I try to bring to the people, something that will last and connect to them for a very long time.
Well said.
Thank you.
All right, well, we're out of time here, Chris, but before we sign off, could you provide a website that people might be able to gain some more information?
Yeah, my website is Chris Ryan Pix, Chris Ryan Pix.com. You can look me up there, and from that website you can connect to my social media stuff, all the other posts I do on the social media you can follow. But that's where you can best see my photographs. You can see a lot more of my work and find out more about me.
Great. Thanks so much for visiting us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
This is George Alger signing off for this segment of Our Ventura TV. Until we meet again.